Boardrooms with Dr. Kiran. Today we have Prabhu Sampath. He's a biotechnology entrepreneur, and in today's discussion we will be talking more about life science. Thank you, Prabhu, for coming for the show.
My pleasure.
So, Prabhu, you are from the life science industry. So we look at the background of life science. The last century was known for more of physics and engineering and manufacturing, and it is predicted that the coming century is more for life science. So can you just give a little background on what is life science?
So before I go into that, I think if you look at 25 years ago when we all passed out of school, and you ask any student who's passing or leaving school, the one thing that would be on his mind is to get an engineering degree. Nobody would talk. So engineers became the first citizens of society, and the so-called biologists were pushed behind. And I think it's turned around, as always things turn around. Today I think biology is becoming the future, and biology is grouped under a field called life sciences because that's directly looking into the life of the difference between in engineering, where you look at process and technology from outside, right from the combustion engine that was discovered, the locomotives, the automobile, all the things that are in the external world. If you all this technology are already in our human body. So when you start looking at inner engineering, or the engineering inside the human body and living organisms, that is what we call as life sciences. So basically, we are looking at the marvels of biology, which we didn't know so far, and that's where we are in the life sciences technology, which is pretty much going to define how the world is going to rotate in the next 100 years.
So the future, you say, is life science?
Yeah, I would call it the century of life sciences. Though people talk about AI and VR going to be big players, I think the bigger player in the next 100 years is going to be biology and life sciences. Yeah.
So on a common man's terms, so how does it impact me or you, or what are the components of life science?
The core of life sciences, there's, if you take a fulcrum or a focal point of life sciences, it revolves around 3 letters, which was something that people didn't know before, but today everybody seems to know to a reasonable extent. This is DNA. Now, DNA is an integral part of our life. Every living organisms, right from a small amoeba or a single cell organism like bacteria and viruses, including the COVID that is there, the fulcrum, the hard one common thing is DNA. And I'll give you an example why things have become much more common. Pre-pandemic, nobody knew the word PCR, right? Nobody knew the word DNA. Today, I think you go and even a man on the road says, I did a PCR test, which is nothing but testing DNA. So DNA is the centerpiece, right, of the things. As long as your DNA is good, you're good. The moment your DNA starts getting damaged, you start saying, why are people aging? Is because our DNA is getting damaged. It's very funny, but if you look at the first human being that was born from the Horn of Africa. So the world over, every human being should look dark, right? The dark, Africa is a place where so why are people looking fair and why are people, it's just because the DNA got destroyed. So being fair is just a mutation, as we call it. Just like we talked about COVID mutations, the original human being, DNA got mutated, and mutation is nothing but changes. Those changes are why we have different people, the Caucasian color and so on. So the centerpiece is DNA.
What is the role of DNA, or how does the DNA is going to change the, talk about the life science and how it impact the different aspects of human life?
I think there are endless applications, but I'll probably talk about 4 major core areas where DNA is playing a very important role today. The first being food, right? Now, if you look at globally, more children today die because of malnutrition. We always think people die of malaria, people die of cancer, but more children today are dying because they just don't get enough food. Now, how do we ensure that every citizen or every person across the global citizen gets enough food? The only way we can do is that if you take rice or if you take wheat that require a certain amount of soil and certain amount of water for crops to survive, if you're able to grow rice and wheat in Antarctica, or if you're able to grow any green fruit in the Sahara Desert, then you've solved half the world's problems, right? So if you're able to develop a crop that grows across all seasons with minimal water, does not get destroyed by pests, creates enough food security for the whole world, right? So one is food, to ensure that we have enough food, and the only way we can ensure food is that we ensure that crops grow all the time in the year in all places, and that can be done by modifying DNA. Now, let's take a very simple example of a tomato that grows in California on the west coast of the US, right? Now, the most tomatoes grow there. By the time it reaches the east coast, which is a 6-hour flight, so a truck is going to take much longer, right? The tomatoes are crushed. So by just modifying a simple gene with no side effects, the taste of the tomato remains the same. Just by modifying a simple gene, a Californian tomato that is grown in California reaches New York, even 3 days in a truck, and it is intact. It just doesn't get destroyed. The life of a tomato is much longer. So that is one simple example of food security. Well, tomato is not life-saving, but when it comes to wheat and rice, they are life-saving. So that's one area. Now, and since we are in the Middle East, I'll talk about our own experience about DNA in food here. What is the most common tree that you see is the date palm, right? So now the governments here, especially the Saudi and the UAE governments and Qatar, they wanted to ensure that whatever happens, the date palm should never get destroyed. That should always stay. So we were able to sequence the DNA of the date palm, and we have the DNA stored. So which means whatever happens, we're able to, using tissue culture, we're able to create a date palm tree. And going back historically, not many people know this one, is that date palm trees were the main source of income for Arab traders. You know, camels and date palm trees are the only way they would say a person was rich. But the problem with the date palm tree, if I'm a date palm farmer traditionally, the date palm tree produces, we know, looking at a date palm tree, we don't know whether it's male or female. We have to wait for 8 years for a date palm tree to become big. And only after 8 years, we know that the tree is male or female. And only the female produces the fruit. So which means if you are a date palm farmer and if you have 100 trees, and 99 of them are male, and you have only one female, you wait for 8 years, at the end of the 8 years, you realize that you've made a complete loss. And today, by DNA sequencing, we are able to select a sapling, which is female. So you have a big farm of 1,000 trees, and you have 999 females, and one male is enough for the cross-pollination. And you are able to, so sexing is possible. We today are able to find out pests that attack date palm trees. And by understanding the DNA of the pest, we are able to control the pest without using fertilizers. So organic farming is something that we hear, but we are talking about biological organics, you know, using, just changing DNA, we are preventing diseases, right? So this is one major area that we would think. So once you have enough food, what we need to ensure is that we are in good health. And when we look about health, one of the common things that we see, diseases that used to come much late in the past centuries, we see people dying very young, very early. And immediately people think it is due to lifestyle. But lifestyle is one factor of it, but lifestyle is not the only factor. You would be surprised if I say that only about less than 20% of the cancers, all the cancers that are happening, are due to lifestyle. So, smoking causes cancer, but still about 10% of the smokers. 80% of all the cancers that happen today is because our DNA getting damaged, right? So it's basically, so if you realize that why your DNA is getting damaged, when your DNA is getting damaged, you can understand why you're getting cancer. So 80% of the cases, cancer, which is the biggest killer. Now, DNA, as I said, mutates, right? It changes, it keeps changing. As long as it keeps changing to healthy forms, as long as it keeps its original form intact without getting damaged. Just like when a small child falls down and the knee gets scarred, when a child falls, the first scar happens in the knee, right? DNA also gets scarred. Of course, nobody physically damages the DNA, but as we grow, the DNA gets scarred, and that scarring of DNA is what causes a cancer. Now, okay, so we understand DNA causes cancer. What do we do with it?
What do we do?
This is the next question that's asked. The difficulty is that today, how do we find out somebody has a cancer? You know, for example, if you have breast cancer, a lady goes for a mammography because she sees a lump, and then she goes in the mammography. They would take a tissue. The tissue is then, which we call a biopsy. The biopsy is looked under a microscope by a pathologist, and the pathologist confirms it's a cancer. By the time the cancer is already 10 to 11 years old. So, you know, when you see a physical form on a CT scan or an MRI, you are seeing a cancer which is much, much at an advanced stage. The first cancer cell happens more than 10, 15 years ago. Okay. So, a healthy cell becomes a cancer cell 15 to 20 years before, you see it as a cancer, right? Now, with DNA technology, we are able to find out today when that change is going to happen. So, if you are able to get one healthy cell and one tumor cell at the age of 20, 25, we immediately put them on screening methods, right? So, we know that this tumor cell that this girl is going to have is going to create a breast cancer much later, right? So, early detection of cancer, right? Very, very well. Can we prevent DNA changes? We don't know. This is genetic engineering that is happening. The future might be, we might even be able to go and knock off that one tumor cell. We are not there today. Today, we are only able to detect a tumor cell much early. Thereby, we can prevent cancers. Now, what is the importance of catching cancers early? All cancers, barring lung there are challenges, but most of the cancers can be completely cured if you are able to detect it early. The reason when people say that a patient was found cancer in March, they knew he had cancer in March and by May he dies, because at this stage the cancer has already spread. So by screening using, not the screening using imaging, right? By screening using DNA, we will be able to catch cancers 15 years before a cancer starts.
So, if I stop you there, so is there any such checking facilities available in UAE or across the world, where, because I have not seen people going and doing it. Like we say that, okay, you are above 30, you do health checkup once in 5 years, or above 40, you do twice in a year or once in a year. So, is there anything which is happening right now wherein people should go and can go and do these type of DNA tests to identify cancer?
Yeah, there are two important, that's an important question. There are two important points. One is awareness, and second is the technology and the cost of technology, because anything new is always expensive and it takes time to get deployed. Now, in the region, we've already started screening in Saudi Arabia. Now, the Middle East, whole of Middle East is starting. We're doing some early testing in the UAE also for specific cancers like lung. Now, this has to spread across. We should do it for all cancers. The issue is that, this test initially was costing about $1 million per patient. Yeah, nobody could afford it 10 years back. From $1 million, it came down to about $500,000. I'm talking about per patient. Then it came down to $300,000, $200,000, $100,000, $10,000. Now we're talking about $2,000 to $3,000. And in the next 5 years, we're talking about $400 to $500. Eventually, I was in San Diego in a biotech firm, and they're talking about cancer screening at $10, where basically you look at the DNA and you find out a person has cancer 15 years before you see it on a mammography or an MRI. So that's one part of it, early detection. The second part is about, okay, as I said, this is evolving technology. What do we do for people who already have cancer? This is the important thing that people, my uncle has got cancer, my grandfather has got cancer, what can we do about it? Now, this is again, DNA is a game changer here. Currently, if anybody who's got a cancer, what are the most standard therapies? They do radiotherapy, chemotherapy. These are the only therapies that we know, right? We're using radiation to kill tumor cells. We are using, for example, chemicals. Chemotherapy is nothing but strong chemicals into chemotherapy. But many times, chemotherapy does not work. In 2 years, the cancer comes back. Radiotherapy does not, seems to focus, but the cancer comes back. How do we ensure, is there a better way of this thing? And again, DNA comes to help. Now, the future of medicine is called personalized medicine. Why certain therapies for certain people work and why it does not work for certain other people is because, again, your DNA, it is due to your DNA. Now, we're talking about something called cancer vaccines, the future of cancer. But the difference between a COVID vaccine and a cancer vaccine, COVID vaccine is given to a generic population. A cancer vaccine is very personalized. So, it is made specifically for you. So, they take a tumor cell, and using the tumor cell, they try to find out in the external world, in a lab, what is the cell that can attack the tumor cell and destroy it, right? So this is called immunotherapy, teaching your own immune system to fight a cancer. Now, for example, just in a very simple way, this technology called the CAR T-cell therapy got the Nobel Prize last year. Now, one of the reasons that we get cancer cells is because our T cells are the protective cells that we have. These T cells keep going down. When they go down, that's when cancer begins. Now, what we are trying to do in CAR T-cell therapy is, if there are very few T cells that a patient who has got cancer has, you take the T cells out and grow them outside, create billions of T cells, and then inject it back into the patient. So we are not doing anything, no chemical, no radiation, but using your T cells, create copies of T cells and putting them back, and immediately they destroy the cancer. So this is the future. So immunotherapy, personalized therapies are going to, and they are much more effective, no side effects. The issue is the cost, right? they are expensive today, but the cost is going to come down. The future is going to be all therapies based on DNA. Now, I'm leaving cancer for a minute and talk about any disease. Now, today, a doctor writes an antibiotic for you, right? When you have a cold, you go to the pharmacy and you pick up an antibiotic and you complete one course and the cold is still there, the throat pain is still there. Why the drug is not working for you and it works for somebody else is because your DNA is different and his person's DNA is different. The future will be that your DNA code will be on your, for example, an Emirates ID card, or it will be on an Aadhaar card in India, or a social security card in the US, right? Your DNA is stored there as a chip. So you go into a pharmacy, you put your chip inside, the pharmacy, it will select the drug which will work for your DNA, and the pharmacist will give you a drug that's going to work for you. The future of medicine will be that way. This is about cancer.
What stage is it now, right now? When can a normal person like me or you can go and see this happening in the real world right now?
The big pharma giants like Roche and Bayer already started producing personalized drugs. Now, so I'm not talking about 100 years from now. I'm talking about 7 to 10 years from now. So everybody will have a drug that works on your DNA. Now, since I touched health, I just want to cover quickly 2 more areas in health which are very, very important. One is you see children, who are with intellectual disabilities which are born, and we really sad when we see them. Why are these children being born this way? It's again because of a defect in DNA that they get, right? Now, today there were no technologies available then, and you would realize the child is disabled intellectually disabled only after the child is born. But by today, by early screening, if there is a gene, a father or mother have a gene for producing a child that could have an intellectual disability before they're getting married, by premarital screening, we can tell them not to marry. So by telling them not to marry, we are avoiding disease. In some cases, they decide to get married. They're first cousins. We tell them, if you get married, you're going to have children with defects. They still get married. But after getting married, we are able to, as soon as the lady conceives, by doing tests within 8 weeks of conception, we are able to find out certain disorders like Down syndrome and tell the parents that the child is going to be intellectually disabled. And then it's up to them whether they want to have it. That's one area. One other area that DNA is playing of these things, there are many areas in health, but I'm just giving you in transplant diagnostics. So all of us know about kidney transplants and liver transplants. And whenever the most scary thing after transplant for the patient's relatives and for the patient is my organ going to be accepted or organ going to be rejected, right? After all the help, the organ gets rejected. The reason it is rejecting is because our own body treats the transplanted organ as a foreign body. And it's because the transplanted organ DNA is different and my DNA is different. It sees that foreign DNA and starts attacking it. Now, so the logical thing is our body will not reject a transplanted organ if the DNA is very close to our DNA. So we are now using DNA. If there are 10 donors and 1 recipient, we are trying to find out using DNA technology what is the best match. And if the DNA match is close, we pick up that donor and do a transplant. So I said food and health. So if your food and health is covered, then what are the 2 remaining things that are in the globe? The third thing would be safety and security. You go out, you want to be safe. And we're sitting and talking in Dubai. In Dubai, one of the way they position themselves in the world is one of the safest cities in the world. You can honestly walk with a kilo of gold at 1 a.m. in the morning and nobody will touch you. So safety becomes very, very important to society. And how do we ensure safety? There are 2 important things. One, awareness, but if a crime happens, quickly resolving them. And today, most crimes are getting solved by one technology, which is using DNA. Now, we can ask why DNA, and why is DNA become so important in crime, right? The reason being, in early days, if you remember our school days and so on, any forensic crime scene, you have a set of forensic guys coming, putting black powder and then puffing them with brush and taking fingerprints, right? That's the only way they used to solve crime. Nowadays, they use fingerprints, but criminals have got smart. So they all wear gloves. They make sure that they don't leave fingerprints anywhere on the crime scene. So crimes were unresolved. And that is when they started looking for new evidences and then found out biological material. They found out hair, saliva, somebody would, blood stains, cloth, and so on, which had DNA cells. This became very, very important for solving crime. So basically, if we think there is a suspect, very simply, a suspect would be there. and we go to a crime scene, we pick up a piece of cloth or pick a water bottle where somebody is drunk and thrown it away, we take DNA from the mouth of the water bottle and we get DNA. And if there's a suspect, we take his DNA, and then if they match, we know that he's committed the crime. Very simply, this is what happens. But this is helps in two ways. One is convicting the person if he's done a mistake, but also it helps to a much bigger extent, which is what is important. If he's innocent and he was caught by circumstantially, if he's caught by chance, he was passing in the crime scene, we prove that he didn't do the crime. So it also helps to exonerate innocent people, which is one major thing. 3, the fact that we have DNA technology to solve crime is a deterrent. People know that Dubai has got DNA technology, Saudi has got DNA technology. They are more hesitant to do crime, right? So they know that they'll get caught. So
more of a prevention.
Prevention also. And the last step in prevention, because you said the word prevention, is what we are doing here in the Middle East, especially UAE, Saudi, Qatar and all that. If we know a criminal who's done even a petty crime, once he does a crime and he is arrested, if he's convicted, we keep his DNA in the library. We keep his DNA in a database. So next time, if there is a crime somewhere, and if the guy commits the same crime, we collect DNA from the crime scene, we put it in the database library, immediately catch the guy. So we're able to catch database suspects and criminals, by which we are preventing lots of crime. Now, a lot of unresolved crime all over the world have been resolved. A crime that was not solved for 30 years, 40 years, today has been solved like using DNA. Now, if I've completed DNA, the last part, which is the biggest challenge for us, for mankind, is energy, right? We all know fossil fuel. We live in the Middle East, but we know even in a place like here, they're already preparing for alternative energy, and that's the reason we see so many Teslas running here, right? So fossil fuel will become extinct with time. DNA is going to be a major answer. I know Elon Musk will not like this one, but DNA will play a very important role in fuel as well, where we will have biological fuel cells, right? So with completely green, there are bacteria that are able to convert the CO2 into energy, and that can be used for energy. So the entire 4 aspects, if you take the health, forensic, safety and security, and lastly energy, DNA will play a vital role. And that is the reason I'm saying the next 100 years are going to be decided by life sciences. Yeah.
So if you, I think it's quite a big area, right? You talk about health itself. It's a lot of aspect, whether it is pharmacy side, whether it's in the hospital or in the treatment side, or when it comes to food. So how does, like a student, for example, and if I am so fascinated with life science, and I want to pursue in any of these fields. So what are the starting point of a student? I mean, of course, you need to study some basic science, but how will you choose that? Okay, I want to go on the foods life science area, or I would like to focus on forensic side, where all about the DNA testing and crime scene, which is more fascinating for some people, for someone else, or when it comes to the health aspect or the energy sector. So at what point, people can choose a career in that, and how they will be going to different angles, or basically from a student point of view?
Yeah, sure. I think it's again a good question that students keep asking me. First is, you need to have a basic degree in biology at your BS level, right? Okay. So when you're coming to a postgraduate degree, that's where you can pick up an area that you could choose. There are degrees that do a general biotechnology degree or a general genetics degree, and then they have a specialization in certain areas like forensic genetics. They have a specialization in cancer genetics or disease genetics. They have a specialization in industry genetics, for example. Now, the way leather is treated today, in the olden days, they used to put it in through chemicals and bang them and so on. Today, all leather is treated using bacteria, by which leather becomes soft. So that is industrial biotechnology. So depending upon the interest of the student, a student could very clearly say, I want to be in academia. I want to be in industry. I want to be in governmental agencies like forensics. Depending upon what they do, they can specialize. But at the specialization level in masters, they could do a genetics degree and pick up an offshoot specialization, for example, where they want to go. But the bigger thing, I think, would also be message would be that students, when more and more students switch into the bio area, they open new frontiers in life sciences. So at this point in time, I just explained 4. So probably there are 40, 45. There are more and more avenues opening every day. Right? I said even the simple currency notes today are stable and they are hard. They don't tear, not because of better printing or better inks, it's because of the DNA used in that. So but there is biology in every currency note that you use, right? Now, I talked, just to counter the leather industry, now we're getting vegan belts everywhere, right? Because the veganism and animal, this thing is becoming a big this thing. So by using DNA, you're able to produce belts which are completely vegan. So, the applications are endless, but everywhere the heart is DNA.
You've seen a lot of positive about the DNA and the implication of DNA in every life. So is there anything negative? You talk about the food, you do the genetic changes in a food industry, whether it is rice or does it cause any sort of health issues? One, people are worried about that, that's one. And can it be misused by, when you see in movies and all these things, they clone or they use DNA for a lot of bad activities, etc. So how is there any rules and regulations? Can you throw some light on this area?
Yeah, it's a good question, and again, people there are a lot of skepticism into that without reading reality. There is a possible area of concern which I understand, but there need to be some balance and checks. For example, let me give you an area about databasing, criminal databasing that I talked about. The UK follows a certain law. Now, we think the guy is a suspect. He probably never did a crime. We suspect they keep the DNA of the suspect in the database. But let's say that somebody can misuse his DNA and put something in a crime scene and then catch him or whatever, right? So what they've done is, for example, if the person's DNA is kept for more than 5 years or 6 years in database and there is no crime on him, they destroy his DNA. For example, this is one check on this thing. Now about GMOs, when people say this contain no GMO, till date we have not seen any side effects of GMO, genetically modified food, creating any disease to anyone, right? There is no side effects. It's a lot of scare and so on. But genetically modified food or GMO food is required to solve food scarcity and food security, as I talked about. The negative part of it, if technology goes into the corporate, where corporate Monsanto and these big giants sort of hold this thing, and everybody has to buy genetically modified seeds from them, then the farmers are pretty much at the mercy of them. So this should be at a social level, at a cooperative level, where it should be accessible to common man. When technology is at the hands of a few people, then it isn't always an issue. I talked about the same thing about cancer therapies. The day immunotherapy, which is going to be the future of solving cancer using your own biology, the day immunotherapy becomes as inexpensive as taking an X-ray, that is when DNA technology is going to be really useful. So the negatives or disadvantages, I would say, is the cost, because there's a lot of R&D and a lot of this thing. But when it goes on scale, it will change. And I'll give you my experience with COVID testing itself. Now, when COVID testing started at the pandemic in early January 2020, we were talking about $60 a test. Today, we are able to do COVID testing at about $2 a test. So when mass adoption and more people take it, technology also will support it. So this is what I think. But we are in a phase where technology is evolving and only few can afford it. So it should become as negative. The third and the last and the final thing that I would want to say is that this is not to eat any industry. People always think, when DNA, for example, if vegan belts come, nobody is going to buy leather belts. No. These are people, there's a lot of negative propaganda and negative campaigning about it. There are people who always wear a leather belt. That's going to stay forever. We all wear leather shoes. I don't think people are going to use shoes made out of plastic in 10 years from now. Leather will continue. So the question is, we need to address people who are skeptical. Like, there is a gun lobby in the US. There's a tobacco lobby which is very powerful, and all these have survived. So as long as we know that this is not going to cause harm to mankind, we should promote it. So I would say the negatives are less and positives are much more.
So like when it comes to, you told the last century is more of engineering and technology, and the technology is really ruling today's world. We talk about people losing jobs, 700 to 800 million people, jobs are going to be replaced by artificial intelligence and VI. But you talk about double the type of jobs you're going to create because of the use of AI and VR and VI, etc. So similarly, I'm sure in the DNA is again, life science is going to create a lot of new jobs, because people cannot live without food, people cannot with security, health, and all power. I mean, these are the energy, and these are the four major things which today we need. We cannot have one out in our daily life.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot for Prabhu for coming for this particular show. I think a lot of people were not aware much about life science. We all know about technology, artificial intelligence, blockchain. This is something which we hear all the time. But the importance of life science and the role a DNA plays in that, and how it impacts, for example, food, even security and health, and the medical science, as well as the energy segment. I think I'm sure a lot of students who are watching, or the parents who really want to see where they want to take the students' future, I think this is one area which definitely going to be, nobody is going to take out this particular job out, and a lot of scope is there. I'm sure everybody will research to get more information, but whatever information you shared it's very valuable. So thanks a lot for sharing
It is my pleasure.
Experience and coming and giving your time. Thank you.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Just one concluding remark, I would say, as people live longer, the only diseases that are going to come are diseases of the DNA. So DNA will stay forever. As long as human beings live, DNA will stay. Like diagnosis, DNA also will stay.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.